How can self-care and compassion actually help us with our emotional resilience after some sort of adversity in our lives? Y'all, this is lesson 3 of 10 in a research-based resilience curriculum designed specifically for our breast cancer patients. And we're going to walk through it together one step at a time. So let's go. Let's do this.
On this ocean, every wave brings it closer to home. And no matter what you think, you are never alone.
Hey y'all, welcome back. This is lesson 3 of 10 in our research-based resilience curriculum for breast cancer patients. And in today's class, we're going to talk about that first pillar to resilience, self-care and compassion, and how it can help us with that emotional resilience. If you remember from a previous class, and if not, quick review here. In order to obtain our ultimate resilience, there are 6 key components or pillars that we need to strengthen. They are self-care and compassion, support and connection, positive effect, healthy coping, finding purpose, and mindfulness. And today's focus is on that first pillar in regards to our emotional resilience. So let's talk about emotions. Prior to cancer, y'all, I was not a stranger to emotions. I had known fear before. I knew sadness. I've cried, right? But then I was diagnosed with cancer, and this was somehow different. It was intense. It was overwhelming. It was flattening. And I didn't entirely know how to handle them. So I tried 2 very ineffective strategies. The first one that I did was I thought that, hey, if fear is floating here next to me, if I dress it up, put a pretty little dress on it, maybe a hat, and I call him something that he's not. In other words, I try to silver lining everything rather than just simply letting fear be as fear was, then somehow it could be less powerful over me, right? It doesn't work that way. That strategy crashed and burned, didn't work. Fear wanted to be heard. The second strategy that I tried was when I was told that I needed to face my emotions and I couldn't run from them. Well, I wrongfully assumed that that meant that it was me versus them. I thought that I had to have myself a nice good old duel. Me, fear. One of us was going to win and one wasn't, and I wasn't going down without a fight. But it doesn't work that way either, because you can't carve off part of your humanity. It doesn't work that way. So then after lots and lots of processing, it finally comes down to acceptance. And this was a big learning curve for me, y'all. But acceptance doesn't mean that we like it or that we would want to do it again. In fact, if you were giving me the chance for a do-over, I am not that person that would say, sure, let me do cancer. Look at all the great things that came. Nope. I would say, keep that the heck away from me, right? Who wants that? But it doesn't work like that either. So how can I have acceptance if I really, really just don't like it? All right, let's talk about what some of the experts say. Brene Brown, as y'all know, I love her. In Rising Strong, she writes, we can't rise strong when we're on the run. And Lisa Turkhurst in It's Not Supposed to Be This Way says feeling the pain is the first step towards healing the pain. And then in a resilience curriculum, the Foundation of Resilience with the great courses, the instructor Burkholm says, the ability to sit with discomfort of uncomfortable emotions and to not judge them helps us to hear them. Why the heck do I want to hear them? Why do I want to look at them and talk to them and understand them better? Well, here's why. Because when we hear them, that's when we begin to understand them. We can process through them, which leads towards acceptance and ultimate healing. All right? So this calls for another shift in perspective and having a new relationship with some unpleasant emotions. Instead of hating fear for being there, maybe pat it on its head for its noble job. Fear isn't always the bad guy. Fear is trying to keep us safe. In times of great danger, like let's say we're out in the wild, animal approaches, it's fear that motivates me to either run away from it or to defend myself. If a ball is getting hurled at my face, it's fear that helps me either catch it or move out of the way. That same fear is what motivates me to go to my doctor's appointments in the first place. So fear has its role. Fear is trying to keep us safe. You know, my dad even sent a cartoon picture to me once, and I want to share with y'all because it's awesome. But there's that age old question, right? Is the glass half full or half empty? And if you were to ask me, I would always say that it's half full. It's half full, optimist to the core. And if it wasn't, I'd find the faucet and fill it up and make it half full. But this cartoon that he sent put a new spin on it. And it was a picture of a glass that was half full with water. And on the bottom part, it had a bracket that said half full. And on the top part by the air, it had another bracket that said half full. So, in other words, this glass is not half full or half empty. It is 100% full. Just half of it is with water and half of it is with air. And both water and air have value. Well, same thing with our emotions. Even though that fear or sadness, maybe they're unpleasant, they have value too. So let's talk about, there's a book, The Body Keeps the Score, Brain, Mind, and Body in the Healing of Trauma, written by Kolk. And they talk about hypervigilance, right? And in relation to hypervigilance, they say that it results not because of the lack of willpower or bad character. They are caused by actual changes in the brain. So what happens is you have some kind of trigger and it activates the sensations that are in your memory that haven't been processed yet. And your amygdala is going off all crazy. And what ends up happening is you react as if that trauma is happening at that moment. And it creates that, it hijacks that brain, as we talked before, goes and activates that fight or flight response. So you're acting as if that was a real threat at that moment in time. Your body's trying to protect you. So if acceptance is the ultimate goal, how do I get there? Don't just tell me, hey, you got to learn to like it and accept it, because that's not going to do me any good. How do I do that? Well, outline girl, I need to know my steps. 3 steps. First of all, we have to name it. Second of all, we'll practice some mindful breathing to help reconnect that emotional brain with our logical brain. And then third thing is we'll work on some healthy coping strategies. Kolk even says that knowing what we feel is the first step to knowing why we feel that way. Also in the Whole Brain Child, Siegel and Bryson say that you have to name it to tame it. So this goes back to our step number 1, right? We have to name and identify that emotion. So whatever I'm feeling, recognize, hey, this is fear, or maybe it's anger, and notice what's happening in your body and actually give it a name. To help with this, Gloria Wilcox has this feeling wheel. I had never heard about that before until a counselor once told me, but it's awesome. Y'all Google it. It's a wheel, and it's got different colors on it based off of the different shades of emotions, I guess. And then there's words that you can use. I'm angry, I'm irate, I'm feeling this. And sometimes it's even okay if you can't get the word out, if all you can say is, I'm in the red today. This is how I'm feeling, right? But attach a name to what you're feeling. I even like to use my imagination, and there's an excellent movie, Inside Out, where they have all your little emotions up in your brain. And I like to imagine what mine are like. Joy used to always take the reins and try to butt everybody out from that control panel. That's what was going on in me. Learn to like that little purple guy after a while. At first he annoyed me, but recognizing that fear actually does have its role. And also when you're naming these emotions and you're recognizing what's happening in your body, pay attention to things like secondary emotions. Anger, for example. Anger can often cover up things like fear or sadness. Grief, as we talked about in a previous episode, is a very complex emotion that, yes, we have if we have dealt with breast cancer, because we have had, as Brene Brown says, that loss, that longing, and that feeling of being lost. And then also guilt and shame. They can layer on top some of those negative emotions too, especially once you cross that threshold to survivorhood. You feel guilty for feeling this way. Oh, I shouldn't be nothing but happy and smiles. Well, you can be that, and you can still be all those other things too. But sometimes we'll layer that expectation on top of ourselves, and then we'll feel guilty when we don't meet some unrealistic expectation, or if we try to compare ourselves to somebody else. I feel so guilty or shameful that I feel this way when somebody else has it worse. No, it is your story. It's your body, and you're entitled to feel however you feel whenever you feel it. So recognize it and name it. The second step in our outline is some mindful breathing. So when I get panicked and people would be like, you just got to breathe, Joyce, just breathe. Yeah, okay. I don't remember how that's done. Okay, do you inhale, exhale? What? I don't know the steps to breathing when I'm panicked. So if we can focus and do some mindful breathing, it brings our attention deliberately to our breath and to our bodies. And so here are just a few examples of mindful breathing. If you Google it, there's a whole slew of them out there. Try one, find one that works for you. The first one I like to call butterfly breathing. I'm sure it has another name, but this is the one that we do in yoga at the end of the day. We inhale, raising our arms up, and exhale. And we do that a couple of times and taking our deep breaths as we inhale or as we raise our arms and lower them, butterfly breathing. Another one is I call spiral breathing. So you can either draw a spiral on a sheet of paper or you can just even do it in midair. But as you inhale, move your finger clockwise. And then as you exhale, move it the opposite direction. That's spiral breathing. And then a third one I want to share with you is finger breathing, where you can take your thumb, start at close to the palm of your hand, and you inhale as you move it towards the tips of your fingers, and exhale as you move it back towards the palm of your hand. So inhale and exhale. So Google, there are several different strategies out there. Find one that works for you. But this helps us remember how exactly to get oxygen into our bodies in times of great panic. And then the third strategy is dealing with some healthy coping strategies. This is so huge and so important that it is actually its own pillar to resilience. So we're going to dedicate an entire lesson to healthy coping strategies. However, in today's class, I want to leave you with one thing in regards to that. I'm a huge advocate for therapy, and I remember one time in session I was describing how I felt to be, I'm in this ocean, I'm fatigued, I can't swim, I've been moving my arms and my legs vigorously forever, and waves are crashing all about me, and at any moment I'm getting pulled under and I'm drowning because I can't do it anymore. And that day she spoke to me using a metaphor, which is my language, so I got it. She said, hey Joyce, in those moments, what's wrong with rolling onto your back and floating? And I thought that was genius because that's the first thing when our kids are learning how to swim that we teach them. You get into great danger, just take a moment, roll onto your back and float. It doesn't mean their swim is over, and it doesn't mean that they're giving up. They're just taking a moment to catch their breath. It took me some time to get that out of the metaphor in terms of my everyday cancer mess. And here's what I finally came up with. Floating can look different from one person to the next. Maybe it's taking a hot shower. Maybe it's holding onto a cup of coffee and feeling that heat transfer to your hands. Maybe it's going for a walk or listening to soft music. The idea behind floating isn't to solve your problem in that moment. It's about taking a moment to just be, to catch your breath, to breathe, and to give yourself a moment. You can strategize and move forward with your action plan after you've taken a moment to catch your breath, right? Again, it doesn't mean you're giving up. It doesn't mean your fight is over. You're just taking a moment. So floating, that's my metaphor. Actually, it's not my metaphor. I stole it, but it's a great one. So a few tips that I want to leave you with in terms of actual treatment. The day of surgery, I had to have a mastectomy, and y'all, I am still haunted by that room because I was an idiot and looked around and soaked up way too many things from that environment, and they became a source of some PTSD like symptoms later on. Don't do that. Instead, here is the best advice ever. All right, you're rolling into surgery and you're a little bit lucid. They give you some medicine, but you're still, lucid. You have to get up on the table and so on. Instead of looking around the room, you make it your brain's job to focus on one person. You want to get their entire life story. You want to be able to describe what they look like in detail. What is their eye color, their hair color, and so on. Be able to write a book about that one nurse, that one person. Because if you give your brain that job at that moment, it won't take in the rest of this stuff and you won't remember all of the icky stuff, right? I did this for my second surgery. Magical. I've told so many women that trick and they tell me afterwards, thank God I did that. Thank God I did that. Another little tip that I want to leave you with is if you have to have radiation, I recommend making a countdown chain, but doing it in segments. So this week is all blue, the next week is yellow, the next week is green. So you can look at it and instead of going, I have 25 days, because that's overwhelming, you can go, hey, I only have 2 more colors left. I only have 3 yellows, and so on. So it can help shift that perspective a little bit and make it more digestible when you have such a monstrous goal like that. So I want you to remember, listen, we cannot always control when life blows up in front of us. It would be great, but I haven't learned that trick yet, and I don't think it exists. So we can't control that, right? But we can control our response to it. We can control the fact that, okay, you know what? I'm going to name how I'm feeling. I'm going to do some mindful breathing, and I'm going to work on some healthy coping strategies. Before our next lesson, I want to leave you with a challenge or homework, however you want to think about it. So use a moment of calm and clarity to get a figurative message in a bottle for future you to find, right? So I wrote myself a letter. And I got a message so that when I'm panicking, what are all the things that I would need to hear and read? Because who knows you best? You know you best. So you talk to yourself from a moment of calm so that when you're panicked, you can be reminded of all those things. I wrote myself a letter. I told a friend to do this. She did a video recording of herself, whipped out her cell phone, and so whenever she needed to be reminded of these things, she could just play that for herself. You could even make a playlist of songs that say everything that you need to hear or maybe even feel in that moment. So, challenge for you is get that message out for future you to find. I'll see you guys next class. Thanks, guys. Bye.